Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to the very first episode of Yet Another Railroad Podcast, which is yet another railroad podcast all about trains. So each episode will come with you on different random railroad subjects, mostly organized, mostly not. I'm your host, Ben, along with. I'm not Ben.
What?
That's Ben. I'm Will.
Ryan?
Hold on. Wow, that's awkward. Hello, I'm your host, Will. This is Ben here.
Ben?
Really? That's how you're gonna do it? We're leaving
I don't
that
know.
in.
You told us that I
We're,
gave too much intro
we're
before.
leaving it in. What we're going to be doing this week is we're going to be talking about the old secondhand cars of Amtrak.
So here's my first question for you, and I'm curious if you can answer this. When Railpax was forming, so Railpax, as we all know, is the predecessor to Amtrak. Was it always like kind of that idea of, hey, we're going to acquire passenger cars from the railroads we'll be taking over service from, or was there already kind of a plan in place for how to get Railpax specific cars for this sort of thing?
Getting all the stuff secondhand was the temporary. I say temporary. It took them a long time to get rid of all of it. But that was kind of the temporary stopgap plan until they actually got the new equipment, which, as we know, would be like the Amfleet, Superliners, all that stuff. It took a little while to get
Kind
to
of
that
in
point,
the
but yeah.
kind of in the same vein as that, what were the newest cars that were like available? Well, since we're talking like 1971, right?
Yeah,
Like when I
71.
think of most American passenger cars, I think of like the 50s, a little bit of the 60s, and then not too much after that because,
I
the
mean,
interstate was already taking so much competition. Were there new cars at all?
I mean,
What was the state of that?
when Amtrak was shopping around, when they started, of course, they didn't necessarily start. They didn't start with anything. They were just the operating company. Like, okay, we got to do something with that. So the member railroads that signed into Amtrak, they, obviously they were going to dispose of everything or as much as they wanted to.
Mhm.
So Amtrak essentially sifted through what was available, and by some counts, it was around 3,000 cars that were available to them, and they selected 1,190 of them. They usually round up to 1,200, but
Goodness.
that's what they picked for day one, basically.
Okay.
And most of it, by some counts, if you, I highly recommend looking at the book Amtrak by the Numbers. It's got a really interesting little factoid in there. So of that almost 1,200, 90% of those came from 5 railroads: Santa
Dang.
Fe, Southern Pacific, Union Pacific, Seaboard Coastline, and the Burlington Northern. Now,
Makes
obviously, the
sense.
percentage what came from each of those roads varied. Most of it came from Santa Fe and Seaboard,
Mhm.
but
So those are the two passenger trains that
yeah,
actually still cared about passenger
those are
trains.
probably the 2 railroads at the time that probably cared the most. I mean, UP still cared. Burlington Northern kind of did, but kind of didn't. Southern Pacific didn't give a damn at all.
No.
That's a whole
But they
thing
had a
in
lot of
itself.
stuff, so
Yeah, they did. But
just in terms of quantity.
yeah, and then that other 10% came from everybody else. Well, there was one road that was not looked at the time, and that was Penn Central because they were still going through all their bankruptcy stuff.
Yeah,
So
makes sense.
stuff wasn't available yet. It would be, and we'll get there. Um, so the criteria of whomever was selected to go look at all the cars, I honestly don't know what their criteria was. I mean, we can definitely make some assumptions here. Obviously, 1A, usability. Can they use it? Were they able to use it? That was obviously a big thing. Condition was a huge thing as well. I say condition was a huge thing, but they definitely made some questionable purchases, and we will get to
Okay.
that. And I know that anything Bud built was pretty high up on that list as well. Because okay, so
Bud stuff, yeah, some
yeah,
quality.
for passenger car people, they will know this, but for those who don't, Bud equipment generally held up a lot better because it was built to stainless steel, all stainless steel, and it was welded construction typically. So there's very little riveting, and other fastening methods. It was mainly all welded. So generally speaking, they could hold themselves together a lot better than a lot of the Pullman standard ACF American Car Foundry build stuff. And that was kind of one of the criteria. Was
All
a
right.
lot of Bud equipment was bought as well. So they picked up. I mean, pretty much anything that could be used, but also could not be
Okay.
used. So they pretty much bought everything they could from the Santa Fe. Pretty much bought everything they could from the Seaboard.
Makes sense.
UP, they bought a lot, but not well. They bought what was available because now, mind you, this is 1971. Autotrain also came into existence at the end of 1971 as well.
Yep.
So they were both car shopping at about the same time. So Autotrain beat Amtrak to a lot of stuff,
Hmm.
mainly a lot of dome cars.
Makes sense.
So
And
that's
Auto Train, I think, had more of an incentive to get like nicer cars than Amtrak at this time because Amtrak, government funded, still trying to like figure out how to turn a profit and whatnot. And Auto Train, like their whole lifestyle at this point was like trying to be glitzy and glamorous and whatnot.
I mean,
So I
yeah.
could absolutely see most of the nice stuff being taken by
I
Auto
mean, yeah,
Train.
that was kind of the thing. They were more so going for catering to that tourist market. So, what's going to sell better? Boring coaches or a bunch of dome cars? A bunch of dome cars, of course, going to sell better. Um,
Yeah.
so they beat Amtrak to the punch on some Union Pacific and Santa Fe dome cars, plus a small handful of sleeping cars. But in general, UP probably had the third most in terms of contribution. And then BN's weird because they bought pretty much all the old CB&Q Bud stuff, but then they
Yeah.
bought very little Northern Pacific and Great Northern equipment. They did
Interesting.
buy all the Bud built, most of the Bud built stuff, which from those two roads essentially amounted to being dome cars, a couple sleepers, and a few dining cars. I
The slumber
don't.
coaches?
Well, yeah, those are all Bud built, so
Yeah.
yes, those as well. But I don't know why they didn't buy a lot of the other coaches. BN kind of didn't care, but they at least kept stuff well maintained.
Yeah.
So I don't know why they didn't buy a lot of their equipment. I mean, a lot of the stuff that they didn't buy was all built by Pullman standards, so I don't know if it was just
Mhm.
a reputational thing, like, oh, these cars are going to be harder to maintain or whatever. But they
I can
were
see that.
well enough maintained to begin with, so I don't know why they didn't pick them up. It could have been a cost thing. I don't know why they didn't buy those ones. That is still a mystery. But anyway, and then
Interesting.
SP, I don't know, they kind of had to pick and choose with the SP stuff.
Mm.
Um, and it's funny, a lot of the SP stuff they bought, they didn't really use a whole lot.
Remind me, with SP, did they operate the commuter services past Amtrak or
No, 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 no,
no?
no, no. The commuter stuff was all kept by the railroads that ran those. This was all just the intercity stuff.
Like Caltrain and
Yeah,
whatnot. Okay.
yeah, yeah. That was all kept by SP. Kept all the commuter services. Chicago Northwestern kept the commuter services, so on and so forth. It was just all the intercity stuff, and they kind of picked up some dregs from a bunch of other railroads, Norfolk and Western. Um, who else? A handful of cars from the Southern. Um,
Okay.
yeah, it's
So
interesting.
what I'm hearing is mostly the services that to some extent still cared about their passenger service. Like
Yeah,
you're not
generally.
saying trying to think of an example of a service that just did not care. I mean, we
Well,
already talked about Conrail, like that they're not really
well,
relevant here.
Conrad didn't
Or
exist
Penn
yet.
Central,
Penn
sorry.
Central.
All right,
Well,
Penn
we'll
Central.
get to
Yeah.
Penn Central. We'll get there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, it was mostly. I mean, they basically picked up most of the stuff from the handful of roads that still cared, barring Southern Pacific,
Yeah.
because
Makes
that was
sense.
mainly of the equipment that was still around. That was the stuff that was generally in the best shape.
Mhm.
So that's what they started with. Was that whole hodgepodge with the whole hodgepodge of equipment. Um, and so then you ended up with what everybody loves and knows is the Rainbow Era. So you'd have all the different railroads with all the
Yep.
different paint schemes, all operating in the same trains. Um,
But still cool, still
oh yeah, no,
cool.
absolutely. But what's kind of weird too is that so obviously, of course, they started up, and so the railroads still, so the trains were operated by Amtrak, but obviously they borrowed a lot of equipment from other railroads, and they also had to borrow crews, which makes sense.
Didn't own any of this stock, right? It was
Yeah.
all just okay.
Well, I mean, the stuff they owned, but they still had some stuff
Yeah.
that at least until they kind of got everything sorted out, they had to lease
Like
stuff.
I guess what I'm asking, like Southern Pacific, right? After like 5 years, could have been like, "Hey, we want these cars back."
Oh
Like
yeah,
that
no,
was
no, no,
always a
yeah, no, no,
possibility.
no.
Okay.
Like this was the stuff that like they bought it outright. It was Amtrak's. What's interesting though is that there's some railroads that they never actually bought equipment from that had a lot, but they took over their services. So, like Illinois
Interesting.
Central, for example, Amtrak took over the Panama Limited and later the City of New
Hmm.
Orleans, but they didn't buy any Illinois Central equipment.
I mean, I can't say I blame them. I'm sure IC did not really keep very good care of their cars.
Well, no, I mean they were still in pretty good shape.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, yeah, they were. But it's just interesting that they didn't buy.
IC of 1971. That's crazy.
I mean,
I
they
just
weren't.
can't imagine that service being any good at
I
all.
mean, they weren't terrible, but it's just interesting they didn't buy
Okay.
any of them. Missouri Pacific was another one.
Hmm.
They didn't really
That
buy
makes sense
they
too.
didn't really
Yeah.
buy much of what MP had left. And
Okay.
again, I don't know if it was a cost thing or they just decided, hey, we don't need them. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
the whole thing with Amtrak is that yes, we need to save the passenger train. Um,
Yeah. It's the beaching approach to passenger
I mean,
service.
maybe not that extreme, but sure.
That's pretty
I mean,
extreme.
it is pretty
I mean,
extreme.
look at a before and after
Well,
of
yeah, that's
American
true. It
passenger
was
service.
pretty shaved down. It was like I think a third or something like that of the trains that were running on April 30th, 1971. Then May 1st was like a third, something like that. It
Yeah.
was a pretty drastic cut.
And that's just
Um,
71. I mean, we're not even talking about like the 80s and 90s
oh
at this
yeah, I
point.
mean, they bought what they thought they would need to handle what they had or were going to operate. I don't think I don't think they necessarily intended it for it to actually kind of work. The kind of general consensus was that okay, Amtrak's going to die in a couple of years. It'll peter out. Nobody
Yeah.
will care. People stop riding the trains. We'll call this a kind of a failed experiment. Well, they bought these almost 1,200 cars in 1971, and by 1972, 73, they're like, oh crap, we need more.
They didn't really think too much about building new cars until like a few
Not
years later,
yet,
right?
not yet. I mean, that was,
Okay.
I think that was kind of a thought. I think it was more so we'll get new stuff if this actually works. General consensus from a lot of the higher ups in the company at the time were like, yeah, this isn't gonna last long. 72, 73, it's pretty clear that okay, things are on the upturn, slowly, but they're on the upturn.
Okay.
So they had to go shopping again. And so by this time, a couple years on, Penn Central's still a hot mess. It was a hot mess the whole time. A lot of what they had, it wasn't available at the time when Amtrak was formed, so Amtrak did lease quite a bit of it.
Okay.
1973 rolls around. They finally have the ability to purchase equipment, so they buy a lot of what Penn Central had.
They had a lot, I'm sure.
They did.
Being
They had
the
a lot.
largest freaking railroad in the
Oh
world at
yeah,
one point.
they had a ton. I mean, I don't want to say they were desperate, but they did buy a lot of stuff that they probably shouldn't have. But most of it was tend to be kept on the East Coast. Not a lot of it
Hmm.
ventured west of Chicago. This was partially on purpose because all different railroads, all at one point in time, used different electrical systems in their cars.
Yep.
So not everything was 100% compatible. So they kind of had to keep stuff where people who knew how to fix it could fix it. A lot of the, like, kind of those Penn Central stuff was kept in the East, based out like Beech Grove, that kind of stuff. A lot of your Santa Fe stuff was kind of kept out west. Same with kind of the Southern Pacific stuff. But anyway, by 74, 75, they're even in more of a car shortage.
So sorry, when we're talking about car shortages, is it exclusively because they're adding more routes, or is it because the cars are just becoming unusable? Like,
Both.
or is it kind of a
It's
combination?
it's a
Okay.
combination of both because they're adding
I'm
more
just surprised
routes.
they're adding I'm surprised they're adding more routes in the mid
Well, I
70s. Like to
mean,
me that just seems
it's
like
like
such a
services here
time
and
that they
there
were
kind of
trying
thing, but they're getting more ridership, so
to.
trains are getting a little bit longer. But it's
Got
also
it.
too,
Okay.
but it's more so a lot of the equipment was just aging, and so a lot of the
Mhm.
stuff was just becoming unserviceable. Period. Kind of like how I mentioned earlier, they didn't buy a lot of that stuff in Burlington Northern. BN still had it all. Some of those cars they actually leased for like 4 or 5 years, but they never bought them.
Okay.
Why? Again, I have
And
no idea.
I'm sure SBN wouldn't just give them away because
No,
at a
no, they
certain
wouldn't have
point
just
it's
given
like,
it
what the
away,
hell are you going
and
to
I
do
do
with it?
wonder if it was honestly cheaper for them to lease them than to buy them outright. As the 70s kind of progressed, obviously the fleet's getting older. Things are
Hmm.
starting to fall apart more. Some of the cars that they bought in 1971, they never used.
Like what?
They had to cycle everything through all the various shops to at least refurbish it, give them a new coat of paint,
For
clean up
sure.
the interiors a little bit.
Yeah, get rid of the rainbow.
Yeah,
Happy
exactly.
Pride, by the way.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yeah, it is June. Happy Pride, everybody. Um, and so as they ran cars through shops, they were discovering some of them were not as they thought they were. So there were some cars that they bought outright that they never used because upon further inspection weren't as serviceable as I thought they would be. Some of the Santa Fe coaches they bought, there are some of the old Pullman standard cars. They
Yeah.
bought, I can't remember how them were built, but they bought most of them. And I think about a third of them they didn't end up using. So the thing with the Pullman standard cars, the ones that you see that have the stainless steel ribbing on the outside, that's just sheets riveted onto the side of the car. So it's not like it's actually integral to the car structure. It's just
Yeah, it's just
cosmetic. It's
decoration.
just a
Yeah.
cosmetic feature. And what would happen is over the years, because they're just riveted on, of course, there's a seam. It's not a very big one, but there's a seam
Hmm.
nonetheless.
Oh
As
yeah.
cars were washed and went through weather, water would seep in between the panels and the sidewall of the car, and it
Oh
would
yeah.
eat the car from the inside out.
Oh jeez.
Unless you took it off, you wouldn't necessarily see it.
For sure.
And as part of the refurb process, this stuff would have to come off, and they'd take it off,
Oh jeez.
and the
Oh
whole
jeez.
car side would be rotted.
That's not great.
And usually it only accumulated near the bottom where the side sills were, which is structural. And so a lot of these cars would initially never go into service because after they pulled the skins off, they're like, oh, these are a lot uglier than we thought, and it's going to be a lot more expensive to fix these than we thought. That was kind of the general case with a lot of the cars that were retired earlier than that. There was kind of three big periods where Amtrak retired its heritage fleet stuff in the 70s. That was 76, 79, and 81.
Okay.
Most of the stuff that was retired in the mid-70s was all Pullman standard stuff. Vast majority of it.
Yeah, which makes sense because it's not welded together, a lot more
exactly. Again,
floppy.
It's that whole
not built to last,
as it's called. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
A lot of that equipment was falling apart. Not all of it, but in general, I think they just kind of figured, okay, we're just gonna put all these aside and just pretend we're just gonna ignore them. But also, too, by this point, by '76, the AM fleets are starting to come in, so they had new equipment, so they were able to start replacing some of the oldest, most worn out equipment. I was kind of mentioning cars that they bought that they never used.
Mm-hmm.
One set of cars in particular that, for some reason, I don't know why they bought them, so we got to wind the clock back a little bit here. Pennsylvania, that back in 1950, was it 6? They bought a set of cars called the Keystone. They were low-slung, tubular passenger cars that Bud built. This was during the time when there was this big old craze for doing all these low-slung, lightweight, supposedly high-speed passenger trains, none of which worked, by the way. Let's make that perfectly clear. Train X, all that fun stuff. But anyway, a conventional locomotive hauled cars. They weren't conventional, but they were locomotive hauled. And Amtrak bought these cars. Now, they had been sitting in storage from like 1968 to the time Amtrak bought them. Amtrak never used them. I don't know why they bought them. I don't know if it's just because they thought, oh, these are Bud built, we'll buy these. But they were such an oddball set of cars, they never used them. So they just sat in storage until they sold them in 1976.
That's a very bizarre choice.
Look, that was the one thing they were good at, was making bizarre choices.
Yeah, it goes without saying.
But anyway, so at this point in time, especially by 75, they're just desperate for anything that could roll, basically. Because the AM fleets they were in production, but they weren't ready yet.
Yeah.
And they still needed more cars, so they just bought what they could buy. So they picked up a lot of real oddball things in the mid-70s. Like, they were buying cars from private owners. They were buying stuff from tour companies. Because these are people that had cars, and I guess we don't.
Yeah, it's the only ones you can get.
Yeah,
no one was making. Well, I mean, people were making cars, but you've already contracted out the large builders to build cars for you, and you still need more than that.
Mm-hmm. And so they were just buying them where they could buy them. And the reason they went for a lot of these kind of tour operators and private owners, because these cars were already maintained to the point where you could run them on a mainline passenger train. Mm-hmm. So okay, we'll pick these up, I guess. So they picked up a lot of weird, just kind of one-offs and oddballs.
It just popped into my head, because Amtrak basically took over, with passenger service, they essentially just, killed their ability to actually be able to purchase any of these cars. Effectively, they really had that one chance, and, everything after that was just, bits and pieces and the scraps left over. I mean, to me, that's really interesting.
It kind of was. I mean, it really kind of was.
Yeah, if there literally would have been any, Class 2s or Class 3s still operating, passenger service, you would at least have something, but by monopolizing the entire industry, essentially, you just completely killed your ability to be able to replenish from extra sources or third-party sources.
Because, 71, the cars they didn't buy, a lot of the railroads that they didn't purchase stuff from or didn't sell cars to, they're like, okay, well, Amtrak's not taking them, we don't need them, so off to the scrap heap they go. So couple years later, when Amtrak's, hey, we need more, of course, they're gone.
No one's just going to be holding on to cars for 5 years. Yeah.
So you're totally right. By the mid 70s, when they're needing cars, they're having to buy what exists, basically. Mm-hmm. Which usually ended up being a lot of stuff that was kind of serviceable or not really serviceable, but that's just what was there. It's 1973 specifically. They picked up a bunch of cars from the Army because the Army was
God,
liquidating a ton of its fleet because they
those
didn't.
would have been weird cars to see on an Amtrak train.
Well, I mean, they remodeled all of them, so they didn't necessarily run them off the bat. So they
Okay.
bought a bunch of the 50s era hospital and kitchen cars,
Yeah.
which are all built to your standard lightweight, streamlined passenger car design. So shape-wise, they look the same.
Just trying to imagine one of those in Amtrak paint.
Well, they remodeled all of them. So the little short kitchen cars, they actually ran, they turned into baggage cars. And the hospital cars, they remodeled into either baggage dorms or lounge cars. Going back to they bought stuff from private owners. They bought some old pre-World War II lightweight sleeping cars that some private owner had like 10 or 15 of, something like that. I can't remember how they bought them total. They bought them because they were desperate for cars, but then once they got them, they found out in the, which I think it was either the bedrooms or the roomettes, at the time prior to World War II, your toilet and your sink in the rooms were not enclosed in a little annex. They were just in the room. They're just open to the room.
Yeah.
And so when Amtrak bought the cars, whoever inspected them after they got them, it's like, oh, passengers aren't probably going to like that because everything built after the war, the bathrooms were in the rooms were in its own little annex. You could not, you don't have somebody in the room staring at you while you're taking a poop. And so they never put them into service because they rightly figured, oh, people aren't going to like this.
Yeah.
And by that point in time, it was 75. So they were close to getting the amphitheats. So you hit 75, 76, okay, amphitheats are finally coming into the scene. Actually, I think the first couple started riding in late 75, but 76, 77, they're really coming in. So Amtrak really starts paring down a lot of the old junker secondhand cars.
For sure.
Keeping some of the better ones, which was a lot of the Bud-built products. And then as the 70s progress, okay, now they've got a lot more fan fleet cars, which are mainly coaches, so that replace a lot of the coaches on some of your shorter distance, a lot of like the NEC services and a couple of Midwest stuff. And then a lot of those cars got replaced. They obviously went to storage and got sold. By the mid to late 70s, when stuff was selling, it actually, not as much of it was going to scrap as you would think. A lot of it was, but more of it was starting to go to tourist railroads and museums because those industries were really starting to pick up.
That was not a thing that even existed like 10 years before that.
I mean, it did, but it hadn't quite get as much traction as it did as, time went on. So now you have the amp fleets mingling with the old equipment. However, the two were not, of course, compatible because the amp fleets were new and they were electrically powered. So for all the heating, lighting,
and then that steam heating.
Yeah. Exactly. All the old equipment was steam heated. And the new motive power, everybody's, the iconic F40PH, that was also had head-end power, didn't have steam generators in it because why would they? That was old technology.
Yeah.
So what Amtrak then in 76, 77, they started, I think 77 actually, they started pulling some of the older cars aside and started converting them to head-end power. They started with the best stuff, let's put it that way. So they started converting a handful of sleepers, some baggage cars, so they could operate them with the amp fleets on some of the longer distance services like your Lakeshore Limited, for example.
For sure.
Coaches weren't quite a priority yet. They would get there as the 70s kind of concluded.
I assume at this time the old like Santa Fe like high level cars would have been converted too, right?
Those were some of the first ones. So those were some of the early picks actually. The reason they picked a lot of those early because also 77, 78, Superliners were coming into play because some of the high levels were built as a transition car. One end had your high, had your door at the regular level. The other end had the door at the higher level. So a lot of those were selected pretty early on to operate with Superliners. So a lot of those are some of the first cars done in 77 and 78. As the 70s progressed, 77, 78, 79, 80, the HET program begins. They start converting a lot of the better old equipment, secondary equipment, to head-end power. But of course, at the same time, you have the new equipment come into play, so it was also replacing older equipment. So 79, you see another big retirement of cars. Because again, now you have the Superliners, now you have the amp fleets, and you're starting to have the cars that were still good, that could still be used, being converted to HEB. And so pretty much by 79, most of the non-Bud equipment was gone. Fast forward to 1981. So 81 is really the big end of like, okay, steam heating, we're done. That's gone. That's out of the picture.
I was just going to ask, related to steam heating, we all know like the ski train had that cool like PB that had been converted for like steam heating purposes and whatnot, right? Did Amtrak ever operate anything like that?
Yes, they did actually.
Okay.
They did.
Oh boy.
They had a
I assume
couple.
they would have been like B units
Wow!
of some kind.
Just wait. Yes, they picked up a couple of units that Great Northern had done in the late '60s, like they converted to steam generators. But they also, in the mid '70s, they also converted a couple E9 and E8 units and a handful of A units to steam generators and fuel tenders.
Oh god.
Yeah,
I'm sure those looked totally fugly.
I mean, the A unit was about as cursed as you could think it is. It looked like a
Yeah,
normal
yeah.
unit.
That's what I'm thinking of.
It looked like a normal unit, except they covered the
Yeah.
cab windows up and closed all the doors off and sealed up all the vents
Oh my god.
and the
Incredible.
radiators. And so it looks
Why would they do that to an A unit?
Look,
Like they don't require that much horsepower for a passenger service. Like you don't need that many B units. Why waste your friggin' A units on that stuff? This is silly to me.
they did these conversions in like 76, 77.
Yeah,
The freight
yeah.
gauges come on the
Yeah.
scene. Your P30Hs are starting to arrive. So these were units that they didn't need.
That's fair.
And they only did like 6 of them. They didn't do very many.
I'm gonna look up what this looks like. Hang on.
Oh,
It was you said it was an
magical.
E9?
It's magical. Hold on, I'm gonna give you an image. It's magical.
Yeah. Throw it in there.
They just look wrong. And don't worry, folks, for the two of you that are listening to this ramble, we'll put an image of these. We'll put an image of all this stuff. Yes, that's the one I want. Here we go.
Oh my god. Yeah. So it's not like super like obvious that it's a steam unit until you look at the cab.
So look at all the windows being painted over.
Did they do stuff to the top of it too?
Not really. I mean, they might have removed a couple of the radiator, the fans, but other than that, not really.
Yeah, that is unbelievably cursed, especially like just sitting DOT, like right behind the SDP40 or
and my favorite
whatever
part
that
too
is.
is they didn't take the glass out; they just painted over it.
Sure, why not? It's fine.
You know,
It's fine.
Budget's
Insane.
money. No.
I love that.
It's great. It's awesome.
Okay, I just remembered your question from the very beginning about what was available to them in '71. Was any of it new? Not really. I mean, most of it was built in the 40s, 50s. There was a handful of things that were built in the early 60s. That was it.
So no. I mean, no.
It was like nothing. I assume like Santa Fe would have had probably like the most like normal, quote unquote normal, like or not normal, modern like passenger equipment by that time.
Well, I mean, they had the high
Santa
levels,
Fe,
and I mean the last.
they had the high levels, but they also like, and sorry to talk about trains during a train podcast, but they also had like new units specifically built for passenger service, like as late as what 68, 69, basically
67,
like right at the end, 67. Okay. Like right at the end. So like
so
they clearly cared and wanted to like continue this kind of thing. So it makes sense that they would have like the best equipment.
Yeah. And I mean the last of the high levels were built in 64. So you're talking 7 years shy. But
about as new as you can get. More modern than the Superliners, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, at this point, yes. But to round back to your question, no, there was not much new.
We haven't talked about Southern at all yet.
Well, we haven't gotten there.
Contribution.
Thanks for bringing that up. So, winding the clock back to 71, railroads had the choice. They could join Amtrak. If they didn't, they had to operate whatever they were operating when Amtrak started for, I think it was 5 years. And then after that point, they could discontinue stuff if they wanted to. You had 1, 2, 3, I think 6 railroads, if I remember correctly, that did not elect to join Amtrak. Mm-hmm. The Chicago, South Shore, and South Bend. I don't know why that was an option. That one makes no sense to me because that was technically an interurban.
But yeah, it's go there. No, not long distance.
The Georgia Railroad.
Yeah.
Rio Grande.
Yep.
Southern. Rock Island, and I can't remember the other one now.
Why the hell didn't Rock Island join?
They couldn't.
Like they were already Yeah, I was gonna say they're hemorrhaging money.
To join Amtrak, the railroads had to pay into it. It wasn't just like okay, we'll take your stuff. No, they had to pay into it. There was a fee to be a part of Amtrak. And so Rock Island did it because they couldn't really afford it. Rio Grande did it because by that time they were only operating 1 train. And their logic was, well, we don't want to have to schedule Amtrak stuff around our freight train, so we'll just run our passenger train. So then we can do it all ourselves. Southern, I don't remember Southern's reason, but they still kind of cared enough for we can kind of make it work.
I think it was they had a president who was like super nostalgic or something.
Yeah, Greg Glader. That was also kind of part of it too. They had higher ups that were kind of nostalgic and kind of said, we can roll it. We can roll it.
Yeah.
And plus, they only had like two trains, I think, so they didn't have very much. Now, fast forwarding back to the end of the 70s, the Rock Island, mind you, they never joined Amtrak. They just cut all services in '76 and called it that was it.
Yeah.
That was it. And Amtrak, let's just make it clear, did not buy any of those cars because they were all terrible. They were falling apart.
I'm just imagining, like, oh my god, yeah, I'm sure they were
I'll have to
awful.
dig up the
Does
photo.
Amtrak?
No,
Sorry, I was gonna ask. Does Amtrak operate anything on Rock Island track today? Like, I assume not.
I'd have to think about that.
The only thing I could think of would be like some of those weird, like Illinois states funded things with
Yeah,
like,
maybe.
and by weird I mean like discontinued, like the collegiate or something like that.
Yeah, I couldn't think of something off the top of my head, to be honest with you.
Yeah, you're fine.
So 76, Rock Island calls it a day. They exit the scene. They had stuff. I honestly couldn't tell if they even seriously considered looking at any of it, because a lot of what they had was falling apart, and I mean falling
For
apart.
sure.
Like,
Yeah.
you could tell, you could look at those pictures and go like, wow, that is falling apart, and they're using it.
Called it the Rocket, but they really should have called it the Challenger.
I mean, for a whole different reason. Anyway, 76, obviously Penn Central goes away. Conrail comes into the picture in 76 as well. Forgot about them. Part of the deal with Conrail was the passenger services that Conrail had. Somebody had to take over. It was mainly commuter and short distance. The commuter stuff was taken over by various commuter agencies in the various locales that was relevant. But the intercity stuff, which was the NEC, was picked up by Amtrak. And that included a lot of equipment as well, most of which got retired in like a year, because much like the Rock Island stuff, a lot of this equipment was in just horrendous condition.
Yeah, it's Penn Central in the 70s. Yeah, horrible.
You know, it come up through entirely the Penn Central bankruptcy, very limited maintenance, all that kind of stuff. So a lot of this equipment that they picked up from Conrail in 76 was, operated until the Amfleets came into play in 77, and then it was gone because a lot of it was just in horrendous condition.
I'm just imagining like an Amtrak painted Erie Lackawanna like electric unit. Like, oh my god, like straight from the 20s and 30s. I'm sure.
Well, they didn't.
Those are running pretty late.
Well, New Jersey Transit got all that stuff because that was the commuter services.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, they ran those things until the mid 80s. But a lot of that stuff from Conrail, they just, like, I guess we'll use it for now. And then it's the second time they knew came into play, it was gone. The term roach coach was accurate for a lot of that stuff. Jumping back forward to 79, Southern finally decides, okay, we're done. We'll call it a day. So Amtrak bought everything they had, and the equipment was still in pretty good shape. So they initially leased it for about a year. Then they bought it outright. But then 81 hit, and they're done with all the steam heated equipment. So it was the term with that equipment on Amtrak was pretty short lived. That's a lot of the coaches they picked up, they actually sold back to Southern because Southern needed them for their steam excursions.
Did they have time to even paint them? Like,
no, they didn't. I mean, so they, most of the Southern cars were stainless, so they just erased the Southern number and put the Amtrak number. So
especially because it's all steam heated stuff. Like they probably saw like the writing on the wall for them as soon as they acquired them.
Yeah, they by that point in time they knew like they were not really gonna be using any of this stuff anymore. A couple of the cars did get picked for the HEP program, but most of it was they're like, we're not gonna be using this in a couple of years. Yes, they renumbered some of the stuff, but there was really no incentive to paint it. So yeah, so you hit 81, steam heated era comes to a close. So by that point, the stuff that had been converted to HEP was mostly sleeping cars, some dining cars, some coaches, and a lot of baggage cars.
I was going to say, baggage cars lasted until the 21st century.
Yeah, but by that point in time, they're like, okay, it's pretty much phased out. We're not going to be really using a lot of this equipment anymore because we have the newer stuff. Why do we need these? So 81, a lot of stuff that goes into storage, some of it pending HEP conversion or just storage until they sell it. The stuff they didn't sell right away sat in storage until the early 90s. Some of these cars were earmarked for HEP conversion, but it never happened, and then they just kept them for some reason.
Did any of them ever get sold to private companies, or they all just get scrapped at that point?
Well, no, a lot of the stuff they held on to, probably for parts, most likely. I mean, it had been made since the 40s and 50s. You're not going to be able to just go buy parts. So some of the stuff was probably kept for parts, most likely. And I guess if for whatever reason they experienced another shortage where they desperately needed equipment, some of these cars sat in storage for 12 years. Now, they still picked up some old secondhand stuff. Rio Grande, they were still going with the old Rio Grande Zephyr. 83 comes around. Rio Grande finally calls it a day. Amtrak buys actually most of those cars from them.
I'm sure those were in decent condition.
Amtrak bought most of them. with the thought of, hey, we'll convert these to HEP. Well, they didn't.
I'm just imagining an alternate timeline where an F40PH, like by itself, just hauling the freaking Rio Grande Zephyr equipment like it's nothing. Like, oh my god, that'd be a sight to see.
And also, too, the reason they kept some of these older cars is because East Coast, you have restricted clearances, so they still needed some of the single level stuff to go with like the amp fleets, because they didn't obviously build any new single level sleeping cars. That's why they converted mostly sleeping cars and dining cars to HEP for like New York to Florida, New York to Chicago services, that kind of thing. By the time you hit the mid 80s, the secondhand stuff, what's running is mainly confined to the East Coast. With the exception of like the baggage cars, which are floating around everywhere.
Yeah, so there's so many.
Oh, one other one. Autotrain, 81. Autotrain goes bankrupt. Yeah. Went bankrupt earlier, a couple years before that, but they shut down at the end of 81. Amtrak did not buy any of those. All this equipment went up for sale at the very end of 1981, so that was the year where they kind of closed out the steam heated era on Amtrak, and all these cars were still.
I'd forgotten they were steam heated.
All the Autotrain stuff was, so Amtrak didn't need any of them. Well, they did buy a lot of the auto carriers because they picked up that service in 83, but they didn't.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing. Yeah.
But they didn't buy any of the cars. So you hit the mid 80s. At this point, what's left of the old stuff is on the East, filling those roles for stuff that just doesn't exist. And they didn't really have somebody who could build it for them either. Because by this point, Pullman Standard had stopped building passenger cars. They had stopped doing that in 1980. Was it 81, I think? Yeah, 81.
Yeah.
Bud wasn't building intercity passenger equipment anymore by that point. So there wasn't anybody to build new equipment yet. So they just kind of had to make do with what they had. What we now call the heritage fleet, what had been termed by this point in time. It, slowly started dwindling as the years passed. So we'll jump ahead to the early 90s. 93. All that stuff that had been sitting in storage for 12 years, they put up for auction. Most of it gets sold to museums and private owners. Vast majority of it does.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of like dome cars and a lot of cool equipment. So most of that stuff got sold on for preservation and future use elsewhere. Winding back a couple years to the late 80s, they did buy a couple baggage cars from Via Rail.
It still needed more baggage cars. Dang.
Well, I think they did it as a partial trade for some equipment, if I remember correctly. So the Rio Grande domes, when they sold those to Via Rail, I think they traded for a couple baggage cars, something like that.
What a sad deal.
I mean, they got something they figured they could use.
Yeah, I guess.
So progressing through time, a lot of these heritage fleet cars are getting older and older, but they're still going. By the time you hit the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, most of the non-Bud heritage fleet stuff was being retired. Not for saying that was falling apart, it just was getting old. Because some of these cars were 40 or 50 years old by that point in time.
Sure.
But also by this time, Amtrak had also acquired Fleet 2s. They were starting to pick up the Horizons.
Yep.
And the Viewliners were coming into play by the time of the late 90s.
I was going to say a lot less heritage stuff by this point.
So the Viewliners, because it was mainly sleeping cars, could replace a lot of those heritage sleeping cars that were still left. The Am fleets could replace what coaches were still left. But by the early 2000s, you had sleeping cars that had been converted to lounge cars, dining cars, and baggage cars. That was it, basically. And by the mid-2000s, the lounge sleeping car conversions were gone. So basically what you had was your dining cars and your baggage cars. That was it.
Yep. Because they only built one Viewliner car, right?
It was one prototype. That was it.
The Indianapolis or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. I mean, yes, they had amp fleets that could act as dining cars, but they were more like cafes. They weren't really full service.
To imagine, like, up until like the 2000s, you could be in like an old school dining car for those built in like the 50s and 60s. Well, like, so cool.
Some of these cars were in service until the mid 2010s.
Yeah, it's wild.
And some of the baggage cars didn't disappear until this decade. Fast forward to today, none of them are in revenue service anymore. Amtrak basically cleaned out the rest of the heritage fleet in 2018 and 2019, with the exclusion of some baggage cars that they still have on the roster, but for maintenance purposes, I want to say. But I don't think there's anything. There's nothing in revenue service at this point. And some of those cars were 70 years old when they were retired. Yeah.
I mean, Via Rail, their stuff is like about that, right?
Yeah, they're still running the cars that were built for the Canadian in the mid-50s. But yeah, so the reason they could retire these cars was because the new Viewliners started coming into play in the mid-2010s. So then that was dining cars and baggage cars. So that kind of closes out that sort of era, closes out the vintage stuff. Obviously, I know we kind of glossed over, your amphitheaters and your superliners, but
Glossed over Ocean View. How do we forget Ocean View?
Well, yeah.
Actual last Heritage car to be retired. Well, the last Heritage revenue car that could hold people.
No. When did they take that car to service?
It was like 2019 or something, right?
Something like that, yeah. So that dome car was an old Great Northern full dome, one of the great domes. They got that from Burlington Northern in 71, converted it to head and power in the 80s to use on the auto train. And then Amtrak just decided to keep it, and we're like, we'll use this on special excursions and other special services, like fall leaf viewing things and that kind of thing.
That's about it, yeah.
It's kind of cool.
It is a cool car.
It is a cool car.
Amtrak no longer owns it, right?
No, it's who has that now? I should know that, but I can't think of it. But somebody has that now. Yeah, so there's, very out of sequence, but nice distilled synopsis of the Heritage fleet.
It's interesting to me, like, the fact that Amtrak held on to these cars as long as they did. And it was kind of this refusal to, like, upgrade a lot of their more modern things. Like, hey, we're not going to bother with dining cars because we still have the old Heritage ones. Hey, we're not going to bother making more sleepers because we still have the old Heritage ones. And you just kind of see that style for decades and decades, and to me that's just wild that they just did not want to let go of these cars.
Well, I don't know if they didn't want to get rid of them, because I'm sure they probably did, but
for sure, yeah, but it was just like too expensive to like bother.
Money is the thing, but also too, nobody was building them, so the cost of R&D and designing whole new vehicles is expensive.
Yeah, for sure.
So they're not just gonna be like, let's just get new ones. They're gonna work with what they had.
Yeah.
Until they couldn't.
I feel like you can learn a lot about like just the politics of early Amtrak through just all of the stuff to keep these ancient cars alive.
You kind of
like, and the fact that they were like, oh, we're just going to continue using these ancient cars, and they didn't even think about like ordering new cars until 73, 74. Like, goes to show, like, hey, they weren't really in this for the long run at that point by any means.
Yeah, and that's kind of interesting. You can kind of trace like the car history through the politics, just like that. Like they didn't really order new cars right away because they didn't think, oh, this will last a couple of years. That's it.
And you see like this desperation with like the E9A steam converted. Like, oh my god! Like you see this image of them just like desperately trying to get onto like whatever passenger cars they could get their hands on after dismissing all of these cars like 10 years ago. Like, oh my goodness, it's so fascinating.
Again, it's that whole thing of, this is what we'll need. And then we don't need these. Nobody else is going to buy them. Off they go turn into razor blades. And then Amtrak, a couple years later, like, hey, do you guys still have those?
Yeah, and like to me again, like that just shows like Amtrak didn't really have that much faith in themselves, but like Amtrak as a company and what people needed from Amtrak was like, hey, we need more trains. Hey, we need longer trains. And Amtrak didn't really see that in themselves until too little too late. They'd already, passed up the opportunity to get a lot of these cars.
In some sense,
yeah, it really does just speak to, Amtrak's view of themselves and Amtrak's like what they needed. I mean, geez, you need the passenger cars to be able to freaking haul the passengers. That's the entire point of this thing. And yeah, to me, that's like the microcosm right there.
It's a picture of how people within the company thought of itself. But then obviously the public still needed them. People still wanted to use them.
There was still a demand for Amtrak, even if Amtrak thought this would just be like a quick 3-year, like, one and done. We tried.
Well, so that's your Heritage fleet. Very disorganized nutshell, but a nutshell nonetheless.
Thank you for joining us. If you joined us, we appreciate your view or listen.
Hold on a minute. I was thinking, should we do a news section of fun new information, new things? News.
What I find
news.
Can you believe that we're gonna have Amtrak flirt sets?
Wait,
that's freaking nuts. Yeah, in California, they're doing the hydrogen flirt. So like Metro is already planning on doing like their own flirt things for the one of their like services. But apparently Amtrak California specifically is going to have one for I want to say it's the Gold Runner or whatever it's called.
Oh, yeah, that's cool. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's for the Gold Runner. So they're doing hydrogen multiple units
Oh.
And those are coming allegedly next year. They're doing like 10 sets of those.
Huh.
So talk about like total opposites here. These steam heated like heritage cars, like that were still in service until like 10 years ago, and next year they're doing these fancy German like best of the best like train sets in California. Like to me, that's cool. It shows where Amtrak has really risen and really stepped up to the plate here.
That's neat. I didn't know they were looking at one of those. That's cool.
Yeah.
I love all of that. That's
Always
really
love
neat.
Ford stuff. Yeah.
And of course, the Avelios are still not working very well.
Yeah, on the other side of
On
things.
the opposite end of the spectrum, like I do not understand what their issue is. Like, what they bought? Okay, when did they first get those? At this point, was it like 4 or 5 years ago? At this point,
Yeah, this feels like forever. Yeah, I feel like it was announced like 10 years ago at this point.
I mean, yeah, and then they got the
This is
first
why you
sets.
don't
Like,
buy experimental train sets. It's like, oh my god, what were they
well,
thinking?
or if you do, I don't know, maybe test it a bit more.
Yeah,
I
I mean
mean,
they'd already been testing it for so many years, but yeah, test it before you buy it, or like, I don't know, this is ridiculous.
yeah,
I have a lot more faith in the American Pioneer 200 or whatever it's called, the Siemens train that's going to do Brightline West.
oh, that
If
one,
it gets finished,
yeah,
which
if
you know how Brightline is right now.
mhm.
Yeah, American Pioneer, that I have a lot more faith in than the Valia Liberty crap.
Well, as long as you know side battery covers keep falling off and lighting things on fire.
American Pioneer 220, excuse me. Sorry, I said the wrong thing.
Oh,
But yeah, that's like the Siemens Volaro, like fancy. I think it's like a Spanish design or something. It looks really good.
that's cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully that looks better than the things that were so touted and hyped up that still
Oh god,
aren't.
I've seen the pictures of the inside of the Avelia set, and like yeah, they objectively look better than the Acellas, but like everything else is just not there.
That's what I understand from just from hearing rider reaction and that kind of thing. They're not comparable.
Like, it'll be a sad day when the Acellas get retired because their replacement is not adequate enough, in my opinion.
Well, I mean that's why they haven't retired them fully yet because the
Unable
replacement
to,
is not
yeah.
adequate enough.
Yeah, it's utterly ridiculous. It's like what's the name of the HHP8? There we go. Like the HHP8 all over again.
Which is funny. That was like okay, we're gonna take the power car for the Acela and make it a standalone locomotive.
Um, like it sounds like a good idea in concept, and then like
It just
everything was wrong with it. Yeah,
yeah.
like it was just not built right at all. And the fact that you still had the ancient AEM sevens running for so much longer afterwards, like those didn't even get retired until like 2013, 2014, something like that.
Yeah.
Sad. Oh my god, those poor little toasters.
Well, I mean, to be fair, those are also built off of a proven design. Mind you, they tested that proven design for like a year,
Yeah.
so at least it was built off something that actually worked.
Yeah, they don't make them like they used to. I think that's what we're learning here. But
I think what we're learning here too is we could do a whole episode on failures of Amtrak.
yeah, that's coming next time. Yeah, and
Right.
failures of Amtrak or Amtrak's foreign units that were actually quite good or actually quite bad.
Alrighty, folks. Well, for the three of you who tuned in and listened to the entire thing, thank you for listening to the debut episode. We'll have more of
We
these.
appreciate your support.
Not sure how frequent we'll be doing these currently, but they'll come out from time to time. But expect another one here sometime. But yeah, I guess that'll do it for now. I guess toodles, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in.